Central Asia is a special place in some respects, a pretty typical post-Soviet era in other respects, and a pretty dark place if you focus too much on Turkmenistan. Throughout this series, we went through as many details and facets of every country in this region to the extent that such thing is possible in a YouTube series produced, after all, with a minuscule budget compared to other productions. This means there's still more to be said. And in this final episode, let's look at the more funny or odd things that didn't quite fit into the rest of the series. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the 17th and final featured installment of the Central Asia featured series. Alright, so in this episode we'll just wrap up with some funny or odd things. For instance, Vladimir Klitschko, the brother of the current mayor of Kyiv, is born in the Chui region of Kyrgyzstan. It's one of the many reasons why foreign agent type of legislation is always problematic in the post-Soviet space, because anyone born before 1991 is likely to have some ties to another country. Such was the nature of the Soviet project. Speaking of the Soviet project, the Stahanovite movement was not really a movement, but a project. Alexei Stakhanov was just a nice poster face for it. And before being deployed everywhere in the USSR and particularly in eastern Ukraine, the Stakhanovite project was first tested in the gulags in Kazakhstan. Later on, Georgy Malenkov, the immediate successor of Stalin, was also deported here in Kazakhstan as punishment for challenging Nikita Sergeyevich. Point being, Kazakhstan was punishment. It's one of the reasons it's so hard to talk about Kazakhstan in a serious manner. Because, you see, this place hasn't been a meme since 2006 with the release of the movie Borat. In fact, the movie Borat, as gross and offensive as it was also an improvement over the previous memes. Prior to that, Kazakhstan was where you get deported in the gulag for being politically incorrect. And where was that? Well, if it's in Karaganda, then it's basically Vypizhdy. By comparison, the movie Borat convinced people to check out the place, even though it painted an entirely false image of the country. By the way, there are no gypsies in Kazakhstan, contrary to what you've seen in Borat. That's not to say there aren't gypsies in Central Asia, though. There are, especially in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. There used to be quite a few in Turkmenistan as well, but unlike the Balokis, they had the wits to leave the country because, well, living under Berdimuhamedov is just not fun. This place is also where you can trace the origin of certain words in European languages. The most obvious example is Alma-Ata, which means the father of the apples. And that's no joke. Apples are everywhere here, available at ridiculously low prices. The Hungarian word for apple comes from this city. But before you roll the jokes about the steppe and Hungary, keep in mind that the Russian and the Scandinavian word for money also comes from here. So is the Russian word for equal. The name of the Kazakh currency, the tenge, is what led to the Russian word dengi, which means money, and from there onwards, through Proto-Slavs to Scandinavians. The word for money is penge or pengar all the way to modern Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish. But don't tell this to modern Scandinavian nationalists. Having learned about money indirectly from the Golden Horde kinda hurts their feelings. As for the word equal, in Russian it is still tenge and likely evolved alongside the modern Central Asian languages, which also now use the word tenge for equal, though it's kinda archaic, while for money the word aksha or akcha is now the norm in the Turkic part, while in Tajikistan it's pul. Don't ask me why. And since I wrote them on the screen, it's worth noting that writing is highly inconsistent, as they're all trying various versions of transitioning away from the Cyrillic script and towards some version of a Latin script. Some version being the operative phrase here. In Uzbekistan, the character X is still H, just like in Cyrillic. Because why not? Writing in public is perhaps the most confusing here, which shouldn't be a surprise given that in the last 100 years, Uzbekistan wrote in 2 versions of the Arabic script, 3 versions of Latin, and 2 versions of Cyrillic. Since I taped these images, the writing has changed at least once more in September 2023. Heck, even the government entities can't keep up. Some government TV stations write in Latin, others write in Cyrillic. Official government papers are mostly in Cyrillic, but not the same type of Cyrillic. And for tourism purposes, Latin is preferred because 60% of the tourists come from places that write in Latin. But then there is the issue of Uzbek diaspora, which primarily writes in Arabic to this day. To say that the writing is a mess would be an understatement. And once you go into smaller places, it gets even more difficult because very few people speak Russian and nobody speaks English. So if you can't infer from the botched script, well, sucks to be you. It gets even more clownish in Tajikistan. I hope one day I'll get to show it to you up close, but until then you'll have to believe me. In Tajikistan, officially, a modified version of the Cyrillic script is the standard. But that standard is only in government documents. Everywhere else is mostly Latin. But there is no standard for that, so good luck reading basically Farsi in non-standardized Latin script. And then it gets weirder because the Bukharan Jews, who mostly spoke Tajik rather than Uzbek, sometimes write using the Hebrew script. Yes, Farsi written in Hebrew script. Also, between 1989 and 1996, the Perso-Arabic script was heavily promoted. While that is no longer a thing, there still are a lot of people who use that as well. And this isn't anything new. Here's the coat of arms of Tajik SSR 100 years ago. So yeah, writing in this region is a nightmare. And although in theory these places are autocracies and the government can just impose things, in reality, no, they can't. In Uzbekistan, they stopped trying in 2016, and in Tajikistan, they don't even try. I mean, Stalin couldn't do it, and not for lack of trying. Oh, by the way, at the moment I taped nearly all of the footage used in this entire series, we were still being told to wear those ridiculous muzzles to defend us from the Wuhan flu. One of the arguments was that, well, people in Asia wear them all the time and have been doing so for decades, so why do you protest that much? Well, I haven't seen too many. At the time, I was told by the COVID cult that Central Asia doesn't count because potato, and I should travel further south in, proper Asia. Well, I did so in 2023 in Indochina. Not many muzzles here either. And there will be ample time to show that in the next series. And I mention this because the reason episode 17 appears closer to June 2024 rather than early 2022 is because of the pandemic project, more specifically the Kazakh authorities' decision to be stupid in public. Because the Kyrgyz people kicked the president out of the country over the pandemic project, and Uzbekistan didn't even have one to begin with. So yeah, I'm still salty that my second 5-year plan for the Freedom Alternative got derailed over a cough. But less salty than I was in 2020, largely because the series ended up being more interesting by virtue of filming in 2022 after the fundamental changes here started happening really, really fast. So there's that. Alright, what else I forgot to mention? Oh yeah, the cats. Like anywhere in the Turkic world, cats are present, mostly friendly and well-fed, although you get strange looks in Uzbekistan if you stop to pat them, and babushkas pull their grandchildren away when they lean in to pat the cat, like this one in Tashkent, which I noticed after the grandma pulled the little boy away who wanted to pat this fluff. For some reason, locals kinda despise them. At some point, the issue here in Uzbekistan had gotten so bad that even the deranged Karimov regime implemented policies that led to prosecution for those who harmed the fluff. Because even someone who boiled people alive understood that it's haram to needlessly harm the fluff. So yeah, all in all, Central Asia can be a fun place to visit and study, but it's not without its drawbacks. You may get shown cute trains, but in reality most are not like this. Still, they get the job done at amazingly low prices, even for the local incomes. Ultimately, my only regret is that I didn't have more time in Central Asia, and as I alluded to several times, I want to make more time. Inshallah next year. Maybe. But until then, let's close the chapter on this series. There will still be things I'll realize I forgot, but such is life. With a bit of luck, there will be a next time. At least, we're not running out of streaming space. Yet. So with all of that being said, once again, many thanks to the donors circle and all of those who financially supported this series. Couldn't have been done without all of you. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you really like this kind of thing, please hop into the description box and consider supporting the next series. And with that, I will see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative.